Hey guys, how's everyone doing? This is Nick from ForexNoobs.com with the daily analysis. Today is Tuesday the 17th of March 2020 and the time is 1 p.m. here in the UK. You're looking at an AUDCAD daily chart. Now, the first thing you're going to notice is where are my support resistance areas? Well, I'm going to change things up a little bit. What I'm seeing right now with the market in light of all this corona stuff and the massive impact it's having on the economy, guys, it's crazy. What I'm seeing now is echoes of the 2008 financial crisis. The markets are moving in a very similar way to what they were in the 2008 financial crisis. So what does that mean? Well, it means that we need to trade slightly differently. So what I'm going to be doing slowly is I've already discussed my plans last week on trading through the coronavirus and, the things I'm going to put in place. One of the new things I'm going to put in place is I'm going to be doing support resistance areas on the 4-hour chart. Now, the reason I'm doing support resistance areas on the 4-hour chart, or perhaps the 8-hour chart, I've not fully decided, because the reason being that I haven't fully decided what to stick with in terms of support resistance is some of them seem better on the 4-hour, some of them seem better on the 8-hour. But I think we can get to a kind of like a healthy medium, perhaps using the 6-hour chart. So there's going to be some experimenting in the coming week. But the point is that I want to change support resistance areas from the daily chart down to one of the lower time frames between the 4 and the 8-hour charts. The reason is that I'm going to be trading mostly the 1-hour charts during this time. And perhaps in the coming weeks, I'm going to bring back my 2008 approach to trading the daily charts. Thing is, I'm changing a few things in reaction to how the markets have started to move. And there's not a lot that is set in stone. You guys are going to have to give me a week to figure out my full approach and to see if the markets continue to move like crazy. But there are going to be things that we're doing in the coming week that will still allow us to trade, like placing support resistance on the lower time frames and trading the 1-hour charts. Now, next week, I'm thinking on Tuesday, but perhaps on Monday or Wednesday, I'll be holding a webinar on trading through the coronavirus. Now, this webinar is going to be an in-depth webinar on my approach. Now, last week during the analysis, I gave you guys 5 tips to trading through the coronavirus. Next week, I'm going to be doing a whole proper webinar discussing the changes to my strategy and how I'm going to be approaching trading through the coronavirus. Last week was a great week for me anyway, and for those who joined me on my trades. I only ended up taking 2 trades, but they were 2 really, really good trades that I shared with you guys. So last week ended up being a great week. Let's make this week another great week. The way the markets are moving, guys, it's a really kind of exciting time to be trading. And I always need to remind myself the reason why it's an exciting time to be trading. And the reason is that a lot of the world is going to crap with the coronavirus. I just got off the phone an hour ago with I've got a lot of family in Italy. I got off the phone with my uncle in Italy, and they're basically locked in the house. They have to inform the police or some kind of governmental body whenever they want to leave the house. And I think they're only allowed to leave the house twice per day. If they're caught outside the house without permission, they get fines. So I need to remind myself the reasons why it's an exciting time to trade. But nonetheless, it is a bit of an exciting time to trade because 2008 for me was my best and most profitable year ever. And I'm starting to see in the markets what I saw in 2008. So I'm starting to think that 2020 could be kind of like it was in 2008, which would be pretty good. But we always have to remind ourselves of the reason that this is happening. The reasons aren't good, and in the end, I'd be happy to stay with the markets we had last year or the year before and not have the coronavirus rampaging through the world. But hey, it is what it is. We can't control that. But as a byproduct, the markets are moving in a very nice way for us to make profit. So we should take full advantage of it. So I just wanted to explain this because I don't want to give off the impression that I'm happy that this is happening. I'm not happy that the coronavirus is happening, but I'm happy that the markets are moving very nicely for us to take some great trades. So yeah, I guess that's that explanation is over. I'll stop going on about that. Let's look at the charts. I'm going to be placing some support resistance areas. Support resistance areas will be updated day to day. It'll be a bit different to how we normally do them. So the first thing I'm going to do is switch down to the 4 hour. We're just going to use some more basic support resistance areas at the moment. They're going to be updated throughout the day. We'll stick to the 4 hour for now, but like I said, this could slightly change to some different time frame like the 6 hour or the 8 hour. But most of the testing has been done with the 4 hour. But AUDCAD, I believe, is at all-time lows. Well, not all-time, sorry. Like 10-year lows, so we can't really get support resistance on this pair. Now, that's another reason why it's starting to make sense to move to these kind of smaller time frame support resistance areas, because as price moves into areas that it hasn't seen in like a decade, placing support resistance on the daily is going to take weeks of price moving through that area, or at least 1 week. But on the 4 hour, we can get support resistance areas a lot quicker. So we got some support resistance on AUDCAD. I'm going to be monitoring these on the 1 hour chart. So basically place them on the 4 hour, monitor them on the 1 hour. I can remove, actually we need to place one. The rules for placing support resistance areas are a little different, but we'll discuss those in next week's webinar. For this week, if you guys could just, perhaps, if you want to trade the way I'm trading through this, just follow my support resistance areas, copy down mine. I know a lot of you like to place your own support resistance areas, and that's fine. I'll dive in more detail how I actually place them in next week's full webinar, okay? But for now, you're just gonna have to copy mine because you know I can't just explain how I'm placing them in a simple like 5-minute webinar. I need to go over it in a bit of detail. So yeah, okay, AUDCHF we can't really do support resistance, so this pair is just off the table for now. But the great thing about placing on 4 hour, like I said, you don't need as much data, so by tomorrow or by the next day, we might have enough data to have some support resistance for AUDCHF. A lot of these AUD pairs, we're not going to be able to place support resistance for, because you could see that there are, last time it was down at these lows was 2009. So, you know, we just don't really have much to go on for placing support resistance. So we're just going to have to wait and see. Place one here for now, just see if that one holds well at all. I was going to place a bit of a minor support resistance here. We're going to be using some minor support resistance in conjunction with the major support resistance areas. I know that's a bit confusing, but guys, that's just essentially what I'm doing is I'm rolling back to what I traded like in 2008. And in 2008, things were done a bit differently because the market was moving differently. But it was, as I've said already, it was one of my best trading years. No, it was my best trading year ever, not one of. So rolling back to the those times is going to take a little while for me to kind of remember everything, but I do take a lot of notes, so I'm referencing my notes from 2008. One thing that you guys who have been following me for a long time will remember is that I used different grades of support resistance. So you have your majors and you have your minors, and this one's a minor one. So we have some stuff happening on these two. I'll discuss them after we go through the whole list. I've also cleaned up my list, by the way. You'll see that my list of pairs is a lot smaller than it used to be. I've removed all the ones that are just too crazy to trade in these conditions. So, you know, pairs like Euro NOK, USD NOK, stuff like that. Last year, I was looking at trading them because low volatility and we just needed more pairs to trade. But these days, there's just so much volatility on all the majors that we don't even need to look or think about the exotic pairs. And doing so might actually be quite dangerous because they react twofold to this kind of news, and it could be quite risky trading those. So slim down the pairs that we're trading. Mark this as red because AUDCHF, there's no potential setups here right now. So I'm just going to strike it off the list for now. Yeah. AUD-USD is going to be one of our... AUD in general is going to be one of the currencies where we're going to see the least trades on because it's just plummeting. And when it plummets, you just can't really get any clear setups. Last time AUD was this low was all the way back in 2009. So it's been a long time since it was this low. It's low and getting lower. Especially as Corona takes hold in Australia. And also, we're seeing a lot of USD strength. That's the other thing. Now, a lot of people are kind of... I'll just explain something to you guys as far as I understand it. A lot of people don't understand why we're seeing USD strength. USD is... Corona is starting to take hold in the US. The US is grossly underprepared for Corona. So why are we seeing the US dollar strengthening? This is the dollar currency index. Now, as far as my understanding goes, it's because people right now are in panic mode, and what they're doing is they're selling off their investments. So you got stuff like the Dow, the stock market, hedge funds are drying up. Everyone wants cash. They want their money now. They don't want to have investments sitting there, and they're all pulling out so they can get money, especially the rich, so they can get money and buy yachts and go off at sea instead of being around sick people. I'm exaggerating a bit, but the point is all the money is coming out of the stock market and the commodities market. We could see that even yesterday, what's seen as the safe haven, gold, even that crashed yesterday. Sorry, that's silver. But gold crashed yesterday. So we're seeing just a massive outflow of money from commodities, from stocks, from, let's just say, equities and commodities. So what does that mean? That means that the US dollar is coming out. When you're selling a stock, you're selling it for US dollars. Most of the major hedge funds are dealing in US dollars. Not obviously, if you're buying stocks in Europe, you're not getting US dollars, but most of the money coming out is US dollars. So essentially, US dollar is being bought right now because you're selling stocks for US dollars. You're selling commodities for US dollars. So that's why we're seeing this very sharp rise in the US dollar, and that's probably going to continue for a while as the stock market empties out. So we're going to see strengthen the US dollar in the coming weeks, in my opinion. And we're going to see the Aussie dollar just completely continue to crash as the US dollar strengthens. Now, eventually, I would imagine that we're going to see an influx back into gold because it is still a safe haven. But right now, everyone's selling so they can get hold of their US dollars. So we'll see how that happens. We'll see what happens there. Yeah. There's a lot of governments are implementing stimulus, but you know, you can only put so much money in to stimulate the economy before you can't do it anymore. It's just delaying the inevitable, really. So just a word of warning on AUD People are looking for a bottom, but I'm just not quite sure we're going to see that bottom because the US dollar is going to continue to rise as money flows out of, as people sell their stocks and their commodities and equities. That way they can have cash on hand to deal with the coronavirus. So yeah, I wouldn't assume a bottom to AUD not right now anyway. I'm marking these red. This just means that for the next day at least, maybe 2 days, there's not going to be any setups there that I see. So I'm just striking them off the list, and then we'll come back to them in 24 to 48 hours and just see how they're developing and if we're able to place any decent support resistance there and potentially get some trades. CAD JPY is a bit messy. This pair barely made the list of pairs that I'm going to continue trading. Barely made the list. Let's just see how we do with these support resistance areas now on the 4 hour, but I don't really see any setups here. So we'll just strike that one. No, we'll keep it on because we do have some support resistance, but there's no setups there. I'll come back to these ones I've marked as orange where I see some potential setups. Doesn't look like things are that great in Australia either. My mum lives in Australia, so I've got that to worry about too. But thankfully, I am in a position where I can support my family through these times. So this is quite good. We'll come back to this too, EURCAD. The way I want to do it is just place all the support resistance areas, then I'll come back and I'll discuss some potential setups, okay? We'll see if this format works well. This is just a complete mess. This one's just getting struck off the list. I don't know why I kept EURCHF. I think it was an oversight. I didn't want to keep that pair on there. That's just a complete mess. EURJPY, I do want to keep this on here, but right now it's moving into some pretty August 2000. It's moving into some pretty new areas. I'm just not sure if we're going to get good support resistance here. I'm just going to strike it off for 48 hours. Yeah, man, I've seen. It's pretty crazy what's going on with stores. greedy people in Australia, well, greedy people all over the place are just ruining it for everyone, aren't they? Ooh, EURJPY, that's a nice looking setup. Come back to that in a sec. Let's just keep going down this list. Huh. Struggling to place support resistance here on EURUSD. I think this is a decent one, but lower than this, it's hard to see any good ones. I'm very hesitant about placing this second one that I've just placed right here. Because there's this thing in trading, especially when you're placing support resistance areas on smaller time frames, where you're basically curve fitting. You're seeing indecision here right now, and you're like, ooh, that's a great looking setup. If only there was a support area there. Well, what do you know? I can place a support area here because it had this kind of minor bounce here. And then I look back and then it's confirmed by this bounce here. And then it's confirmed by that bounce there. But then it's like, are these really significant bounces? In this case, I would say yes. But you have to be very careful that you don't place an area based on what's happening right now and then try to kind of find an excuse to place it. You know what I mean? That you have to be careful of that. Now, in this specific scenario, we do have some pretty clean bounces here on the 4 hour over the past few weeks. And then on its way through here, it clearly stalled on this level. So yeah, in this specific scenario, I would say that we're not curve fitting, but it's just something to keep in mind. Right, so we got some support resistance areas for EURUSD, and EURUSD also looks good for a potential long setup. So we'll come back to that in a second, guys. Now, as I look at these charts, there's one thing I do want to say. I'm not going to stop trading the daily completely. I'm looking still at trading breakouts on the daily, and that's going to be a major point of discussion in next week's webinar. Now, breakouts on the daily, they're not trades that you hold for a long period of time. Generally, they're trades that we're holding for less than 24 hours. And it's a major part of how I used to trade back in 2008. Trading daily chart breakouts. And I'm looking at bringing that back. These are not great support resistance areas. I'm forcing it with these ones. There's no support resistance areas on this pair. I'm just going to strike this one off for 48 hours, see how it develops. So just to reiterate, red means 24 to 48 hours. I'm not seeing any potential setups. Orange means there's currently potential setups. And no color just means there could be setups in the next, day, in the next 12 hours or so. I know it's a bit confusing right now, but it will start to make sense more and more as we do analysis like this more and more. Interesting. 2011. Yeah, GBP-CHF's just going off. I'm not trading that. I should have removed them when I cleaned up my list, EURCHF and GBP-CHF and New Zealand CHF. So is anyone here actually experiencing the coronavirus right now? I know a few people who are sick, but mostly they're young and healthy, so they should see it. They should get through it without any issue. Oh wow, I'm pricing on the daily. Oops, I was on the wrong time frame. Oh yeah, George is one of the guys that has the coronavirus. I'm sure you all know George. But George will be fine. He's a young guy. So technically, you all know one guy with the coronavirus. Because you all know George. Missed potential setup on GBP-JPY. I'm kind of sad about this one. It's a bit late to enter. All right. Yeah, being a Forex trader is probably one of the best jobs to have right now. Because you don't have to actually leave the house. Alright, you'll see some of these pairs I'm placing support resistance areas on, but we're not doing anything with them. That's just because there's no setups that I see there. I know New Zealand CAD's a bit of an exotic pair. It's not really exotic, but it's not a major. It's a cross pair. And it's a bit of a weird pair that not many people trade, but I do kind of like what I'm seeing in terms of movement here. So I decided to keep it on the list for now, but this might be removed like a lot of the other pairs I've removed. Okay, New Zealand JPY is somewhat interesting. Right, on to New Zealand USD. What are we seeing here? And nothing really of interest here. It's dropping down a bit too quick. USD CAD's shooting up really fast. I really want to try and get in a USD trade though. This is a pretty solid trend that I believe we're going to see in the US dollar. But you'll note that USD CAD was last up here in 2016, and then before then was 2004. So USD is hitting some pretty significant highs, and it's going to keep on rising, in my opinion, like I explained, as all the money flows out of the stock market. That's all basically selling your stocks for US dollars. So people are essentially buying USD. The value of the US dollar is going to rise, in my opinion, and potentially in the coming weeks it might start falling again as money starts flowing back into gold, which in my mind makes sense. But we have to see if that actually happens. That's just a theory. There's no actual proof for that one. But we are definitely seeing the dollar rising in reaction to, because it's being bought essentially. But yeah, I just don't really see any potential setup right now on USD CAD, unfortunately. There might be in the next 12 hours, 24 hours perhaps. I'll just keep monitoring it. USDCHF is a bit more interesting. I thought it'd be a good idea to place support resistance areas as we go in this webinar, but I think that it just stretches the webinar out way too long. So tomorrow I'll place support resistance before the webinar, and then we'll just discuss the potential setups. I think that's a better way of doing it. Then for the next week, you guys can just copy my support resistance areas, and then next week I'll explain exactly how the methodology behind placing them. Right, and gold and silver I'm just not touching, guys, so let's just leave those be. Okay, so let's talk about the actual potential setups now that we've got the support resistance placed. I'm going to be trading mostly the 1 hour for the coming week. We'll start looking more at trying to take advantage of these big moves on the daily next week. But for now, we're going to trade the 1 hour. What? Sorry guys, I just want to rename this because I keep forgetting to do it. Alright, so AUDCAD, what's going on here? We can see on the 1 hour that price is falling into a bit of a range. Now the range isn't that well confirmed right now, but it is falling into a bit of a range. What I'm looking for here on AUDCAD is a push up to this resistance area, stalling at this resistance area, and then a turnaround on the 1 hour. So the great thing with trading these smaller time frames is when we're trading the daily and I say I'm looking for a move up to resistance, stalling out on resistance and a turnaround, we're talking about, a 3 or 4 day process for that to all happen. On the 1 hour chart, this trade can all be completed in like 6 hours. 6 candles, price pushes up to here, hits this area, stalls. So that could be 2 hours, you enter. It could technically be 3 hours if it's really quick that this all happens in. So a lot can happen in a small amount of hours when you're trading the hourly charts. So it does look like it's kind of quite far from it right now, but this could all unfold in the next few hours. So what I'm looking for is price to push up, hit this resistance area, stall out, give us clear signs of stalling, and then a short trade. Now, if that happens, that would confirm that this is a pretty valid range. Then I'll be looking for a long from the bottom here. So basically, I'm looking at trading between these two areas right now. We'll see how these areas hold up as the day goes on. Right, AUDJPY, very similar to AUDCAD, except in this case we have a bit of a minor support resistance here that we're working with, but it's a very similar minor support resistance major on the 1 hour. They behave very, very much the same. So we have price bouncing between these areas. All I'm waiting for is price to push up to the top here. I'm waiting for price to stall out at the top for a potential short. EURCAD, this one's a bit trickier. So it's clear that we have price stalling out on this support area because it stalled out here on its way up. It stalled out here again on its way down. But if we look back here, we can see a lot of signs of this being a pretty solid support area. So what I would like to see right now is for price to dip back down into this support area and stall out here. So a push back down would be great. It looks like it's rushing away right now, so we might not see that. See, in the last 5 minutes since I placed this area, it's already started to push up quite significantly. So we might not be seeing price falling into here, but there's still a pretty decent chance that it will. So let's just leave it for now and see how it plays out. Now, EURJPY, this one's a bit more exciting. This one, we have a very clear indecision candle forming on top of the support area. Now, if we go down to the 1 hour, we can see that we already have a potential setup here. There's a really good risk to reward ratio of around about 2.9 to 3. This is a solid looking setup. We could extend our stop loss a bit, get a bit of a safer stop. That way we're not stopped out by random spikes. But this is actually pretty solid. I'm going to set an order here as soon as this webinar is over, which basically means let's get over this let's finish this webinar pretty quick because I want to take a trade there. Now, in the last 5 minutes, it looks like we got a big spike up in the euro. So this setup is already kind of, look at that. If we traded that on the 30-minute, yeah, I definitely need to get my support resistance areas placed before the webinar because we could have caught this trade here on the 30-minute chart because we're trading 1 hour, 30-minute, and 15-minute at the moment. If my support resistance areas were placed, I would have already alerted you guys to this trade, but now it's a bit too late because the support resistance areas aren't, they were placed during the webinar and now it's already turning. It's a shame that we've missed this move on the 30-minute. Yeah, that's already turning. Oh well. I'm still going to keep an eye on EURUSD. It is pushing up now, but when it hits this top resistance area, it could very much continue down because it is kind of trending down at the moment. So yeah, on the daily, it's starting to trend down. So there's definitely potential for a short if it hits this resistance area. So let's keep an eye on that for a short. New Zealand JPY. Now this one's just stuck in a bit of a range between these two areas. So very similar to the other pairs we were looking at, like AUDCAD and AUDJPY, just waiting for it to hit the top of the range for a potential short there. And USDCHF, now this one's interesting because USD is starting to trend up, as I've already explained in detail. So I would definitely love to get into some sort of long trade here. But what we would need is for price to break through, pull back, and then continue up. So this one's the least likely to occur because we need to see a break of a pretty strong resistance area. So let's just wait and see if we see that break. So that's the setups I'm seeing right now, guys. EURJPY, I'm going to set an order in after this webinar at around about 117.79 with a target at 119.20. If you guys haven't seen the webinar I did last Tuesday on trading through the coronavirus. Please do check that because there's a few things that I'm putting in place in my trading right now that are different to normal. So in terms of risk, in terms of usage of alarms and stuff like that. So do not trade your full amount of risk on this trade if you're taking it. You have to be very, very conservative with risk in situations like this. Yeah, guys, that wraps it up. Do you have any questions? As you guys ask any questions that you may have, all right, guys, it doesn't look like there's any questions, so keep an eye out on these potential setups. Do remember, trading the 1 hour chart is a lot riskier than trading the daily charts, so we are expecting more losses. So more losses, but higher returns, higher risk to reward ratio. So that's what balances it out. If your targets are generally bigger, you can suffer more losses, or you can get through more losses because you're making more per trade. Now, don't let last week fool you. Last week I shared, I think I shared 2 trades only last week via the forum, and both of them were successful. Now, so far, trading the 1 hour charts, we've had a 100% success rate. But don't let that sway you. Don't let that sway you. Don't let that fool you into thinking that that will continue. When we're trading the 1 hour charts, we are going to be taking more losses. Last week was a bit, it was just, random chance, right? So like 2 trades, it's not big enough to have a sample size, right? You could have a 30% win rate and your first 2 trades could be, it's not only a 30% win rate, but just as an example, you could have a 30% win rate and your first 2 trades could be profitable just because you got lucky with your first 2. And then your next 8 could be losses, right? So don't let that fool you. Trading the 1 hour charts is going to be riskier. There are going to be more losing trades, but the profit should still be quite good because our targets, as you see, our targets are generally bigger. So this has a 1 to 3 target. Generally on the dailies, we're getting a 1 to 2 or less target. So this has 1 to 3, depending on where you place your stop loss. Obviously, if you're placing your stop loss this low, it's only 1 to 2. But if you have that tighter stop, it's 1 to 3 or 1 to 2.7, 2.8. So generally speaking, with these trades, we're gaining more per trade. So the more losses are acceptable. Just keep that in mind, guys. Don't let last week make you think that this is all going to be just awesome winning trades. And don't just go all out on this trade because I shared 2 winning trades last week. Then you think, well, I'm going to risk 5% on this one. Nick's been right 2 times in a row. Don't do that. Keep your risk, I wouldn't say minimal, but you need to reassess your risk management rules because you're trading through a crazy period in the markets. You need to reassess your risk management rules and you need to follow those new rules. And if your reassessment is anything but take less risk, you're doing it wrong. You need to take less risk per trade. Anything other than that look, I'll just say it. I don't care if I don't offend anyone. If you're trying to take more risk to try and make more money during these crazy markets, that's stupid. And you're risking losing a lot of money. Because when you get slipped, double. If you're taking 3% risk on a trade and then you get slipped, double your stop loss, that's 6% of your account gone in just one hit. And that's going to take a while to make that 6% back. So don't do that. I'm sharing this trade with you guys. You need to understand that there's a pretty decent chance that this trade might not work out, and you have to lower your risk because you're trading through very uncertain periods. So yeah, thank you guys for attending, and I'll see you for tomorrow's webinar. This looks like it's going to take off now, so I'm going to get out of here and place this order in, this pending order in right now. So thank you guys, and I'll see you for tomorrow's webinar.